The massive crystalline halls of Nexus Prime had never witnessed such chaos. Representatives from 847 different species filled the ancient amphitheater, their various forms creating a bizarre symphony of clicks, growls, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained fury as thousands of alien delegates expressed their outrage in ways that would have been incomprehensible to human observers. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony, his towering form casting long shadows across the speaking platform. His species had ruled this sector of space for over 10,000 years, and his four muscular arms gestured wildly as he addressed the assembly. The universal translator struggled to keep up with his rapid, angry speech. Fellow beings of the Council, Veltar's voice boomed through the hall, we face an unprecedented crisis. The species that calls itself humanity has committed crimes against the very foundation of galactic civilization. A collective hiss rose from the Serpentine delegation, while the crystalline Zephyrians chimed in harmonious discord. The insectoid hive minds buzzed their antennae in agitation, and even the peaceful floating ones pulsed with disturbed bioluminescence. Veltar activated the massive holographic display above the assembly. Images of human colonies flashed across the space, each one causing fresh waves of outrage among the gathered aliens. Green worlds where once there had been barren rock. Thriving cities built in mere decades. Sprawling agricultural complexes that fed millions. Look at this madness, Veltar continued, his voice growing more heated. The humans have terraformed 17 worlds in the Kepler sector. 17 worlds, honored delegates, in less time than it takes most civilizations to complete their initial geological surveys. They have turned lifeless rocks into garden paradises while we debate the proper environmental impact studies for a single mining operation. The Aquarian delegate gurgled something that translated as deep disapproval, while the energy beings flickered with what could only be described as indignation. The Mechanical Construct Coalition emitted synchronized beeps of protest. But that is not the worst of their violations, Veltar pressed on, his four eyes blazing with righteous anger. They have ignored 43 official summons to appear before this council. 43, my friends. They treat our ancient institutions like suggestions, our sacred protocols like mere paperwork to be ignored. More images flashed overhead. Human ships moving freely through restricted space. Human colonies established in forbidden sectors without permits. Human traders negotiating directly with species that the Council had specifically classified as dangerous or unpredictable. They have made first contact with 62 species without filing a single diplomatic protocol, Veltar announced, causing fresh gasps of horror throughout the assembly. They simply arrive at a world, introduce themselves, establish trade relationships, and start cultural exchanges. As if 10,000 years of carefully crafted diplomatic tradition means nothing to them. The ethereal collective's representative shimmered with what appeared to be profound shock, while the Stonewalker delegation rumbled their displeasure in subsonic frequencies that made the entire hall vibrate. Veltar gestured to a new set of images showing human settlements that had somehow managed to coexist peacefully with dozens of different alien species, many of whom had been at war with each other for centuries. Children of different species played together in human schools. Interspecies couples walked hand in hand through human markets. Former enemies shared meals at human restaurants. They have disrupted the careful balance of power that has maintained galactic stability for millennia, Veltar declared. They turn enemies into friends with disturbing ease. They solve centuries-old conflicts by simply treating everyone as neighbors. They have somehow convinced 17 different warring factions to sign peace treaties just so they could all participate in something called a harvest festival on New Terra. The warrior clan's delegation clicked their weapons menacingly, while the ancient observers pulsed with what might have been concern or admiration. It was difficult to tell with their species. Most disturbing of all, Veltar continued, his voice dropping to an ominous whisper that somehow carried throughout the vast hall, they do all of this without seeming to understand that they are violating any rules. When we send official protests, they respond with invitations to cultural exchange programs. When we demand explanations for their actions, they send us recipe collections and friendship bracelets. They treat our righteous anger as if we are simply neighbors having a misunderstanding over a fence line. The assembled delegates erupted into chaos once more. Some species called for immediate military action. Others suggested economic sanctions. A few of the more peaceful delegations wondered aloud if perhaps humanity's approach might actually have some merit, which only increased the outrage from the others. Veltar raised all four arms for silence, and gradually the noise subsided. There is only one solution to this crisis, he announced gravely. The humans must be stopped before they completely destabilize our galaxy. They must be taught to respect the proper order of things. They must be brought to heel. The vote was swift and overwhelming. Species after species cast their ballots in favor of war. The few abstentions came only from civilizations that had already established trade relationships with humanity and seemed reluctant to attack their business partners. Within hours, war fleets from dozens of worlds began mobilizing. Ships that had been built for conquest and intimidation powered up their weapons systems and set course for human space. The greatest military alliance in galactic history was forming, united by their shared outrage at humanity's cheerful disregard for proper protocols. Meanwhile, in a small office building in Geneva, junior diplomatic clerk Li Miho was enjoying his lunch break when the formal declaration of war materialized on his desk in a shower of holographic sparkles. The ornate scroll unrolled itself with great ceremony, revealing elaborate script in 17 different languages. Miho glanced at the heading, which read, "To the primitive species of Sol 3, Final Ultimatum and Declaration of Hostile Intent," and noted that it seemed to be some kind of formal complaint from an organization called the Galactic Council. He filed it under General Correspondence, and returned to his sandwich, completely unaware that the largest military force in galactic history was preparing to invade his solar system. Ambassador Park Jisoo sat in her comfortable office on the 37th floor of the United Earth Diplomatic Center, surrounded by towering stacks of reports from human colonies scattered across the galaxy. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, casting warm light across dozens of colorful folders containing updates from terraforming projects, trade negotiations and cultural exchange programs that seemed to multiply faster than anyone could keep track of. She was particularly absorbed in reading about the remarkable progress on Kepler 186f, where human engineers had somehow managed to create a self-sustaining atmosphere in just 18 months, when her aide Kim Daeho knocked gently on her door. "Ambassador Park," Daeho said, poking his head into the office with a slightly confused expression on his face. "I think we might have a problem with that alien war thing." Jisoo looked up from her reports, blinking in surprise. "War thing?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "What war thing?" Daeho stepped into the office, carrying a tablet that was flashing with dozens of urgent message notifications. "Well, there's been a stack of messages coming in from something called the Galactic Council. They seem pretty upset about something. The latest one has the subject line, 'Final Ultimatum Before Total Annihilation,' in capital letters." "Oh," Jisoo said, setting down her terraforming reports and reaching for the tablet. "That sounds serious. Let me take a look." She scrolled through the diplomatic feeds, her eyebrows rising higher with each message she read. The first few communications were formal and polite, requesting humanity's presence at some kind of galactic assembly. But as the weeks had passed, the messages had become increasingly frantic and threatening. "Apparently we're supposed to surrender immediately," she said, reading the most recent message with mild interest. "Something about violating protocols and ignoring summons. They want us to cease all expansion activities and report to their council for judgment." Daeho peered over her shoulder at the screen. "Should we be worried? They mentioned something about war fleets and military action." Jisoo considered this for a moment, then shrugged. "Well, I suppose we should respond. It would be rude not to." She pulled up a new message window and began typing a polite reply. "To the honored representatives of the Galactic Council," she wrote, "thank you for your recent communications regarding your concerns about human activities in the galaxy. We appreciate you taking the time to reach out to us, and we would be happy to discuss these matters with you in person." She paused, thinking about the current whereabouts of humanity's key officials. "Unfortunately, our scheduling is a bit complicated right now. Admiral Choi Hanna is currently leading our first expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy, which is quite exciting as we've never been that far from home before. She's expected to establish our first intergalactic colony within the next few months." Daeho watched over her shoulder as she continued typing. "Director Yoon Jae-hin is in the middle of some very promising trade negotiations in the Proxima Centauri sector. Apparently the local species there makes the most amazing crystalline artwork, and we're hoping to establish a cultural exchange program along with our trade agreements." "What about our other diplomats?" Daeho asked. "Well, that's the thing," Jisoo said, consulting her scheduling system. "Ambassador Chin is setting up our new embassy on Tau Ceti Prime, Ambassador Rodriguez is mediating a peace treaty between two species in the Vega system who have been fighting over mining rights for 300 years, and Ambassador Singh just sent word that she's discovered an entire civilization of sentient plants who communicate through pheromones. She's learning their language so we can establish proper diplomatic relations." she returned to her message. Most of our diplomatic corps is currently scattered across 3 different galaxies, establishing cultural exchange programs and setting up new trade relationships. Would next quarter work better for everyone? We could probably arrange a meeting somewhere in the Sol system if that would be convenient for you. Should we mention the war fleet thing? Deho asked. Jisoo considered this. I suppose we should acknowledge their concerns. Maybe they're worried about some kind of misunderstanding. She added a final paragraph. We're not entirely sure what protocols you're referring to, but we're always happy to learn about local customs and procedures. Please feel free to send us any relevant documentation, and we'll do our best to comply with your preferences. She signed the message and sent it off, then returned to her terraforming reports. There, she said with satisfaction. I'm sure we can work everything out once we all sit down and talk. While Ambassador Park was handling galactic diplomacy with her characteristic optimism, human expansion continued across the galaxy without pause. On New Busan, a thriving agricultural colony established just 2 years earlier, the settlers were preparing for their first annual harvest festival. The celebration had grown far beyond anything they had originally planned, as word had spread throughout the sector about the amazing variety of foods that humans could grow in previously barren soil. What had started as a simple community gathering to celebrate their successful crops had somehow attracted visitors from 17 different alien species, all curious to see how humans had managed to turn a lifeless rock into a garden paradise in such a short time. The festival now featured cooking competitions, agricultural displays and cultural performances from dozens of different worlds. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, the human settlers had achieved something that galactic xenobiologists had declared impossible. The planet's indigenous life forms were 6-legged creatures that resembled a cross between deer and rabbits, but were covered in iridescent fur that changed colors with their emotions. Previous surveys had classified them as untamable and potentially dangerous. The human colonists, however, had approached them with their typical mixture of curiosity and kindness, offering food and gentle interaction. Within months, the creatures had become not just domesticated, but enthusiastic participants in what the humans cheerfully called an interstellar petting zoo. Alien tourists now traveled from across the sector to experience the unique pleasure of having their emotional state reflected in rainbow patterns across a furry, 6-legged companion's coat. The success of these human settlements was becoming legendary throughout the galaxy, though not always in the way the Galactic Council appreciated. The Hegemony 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with all the pageantry and terror that had conquered 47 worlds before Earth. 200 massive warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached in 3 centuries of warfare. Admiral Krivash stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, surveying the primitive solar system before him. His species, the Hegemony, had ruled this sector of space for over 3,000 years. They were 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, and possessed 4 arms that could crush steel. Their military had never known defeat. Primitive species of Sol 3, Admiral Krivash broadcast across all frequencies, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "You will surrender immediately and unconditionally. Your crimes against galactic order cannot be tolerated. You have exactly 1 standard hour to respond with your complete capitulation, or we will demonstrate why the Hegemony has never lost a war." He waited for the expected response. Fear perhaps. Desperate pleas for mercy. Maybe even an immediate surrender from a species that finally understood they faced their betters. Instead, his communications officer looked up with a confused expression. "Admiral," the officer said hesitantly, "we're receiving an automated response." The message began playing over the bridge speakers in cheerful, upbeat tones. "Welcome to the Sol System, travelers. Thank you for choosing our corner of the galaxy for your visit. 4 asteroid mining permits and equipment rentals, please press 1. 4 trade inquiries and commercial opportunities, please press 2. 4 luxury accommodations at our award-winning Luna Resort and Spa, please press 3. For emergency assistance or navigation help, please press 4. To speak with a customer service representative, please press 0. We hope you enjoy your stay in our neighborhood." Admiral Krivash stared at his communications console in complete bewilderment. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. What is this?" he demanded. Before his communications officer could respond, another ship appeared on their sensors. It was a small, battered-looking freighter that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and held together with hope and determination. The vessel was broadcasting a friendly identification signal that read, Golden Tiger, Independent Mining and Salvage. Captain Han Min-soo had been having a particularly good day. His latest asteroid mining run had yielded an exceptional haul of platinum and rare earth minerals, and he was heading back to Luna Station to sell his cargo when his sensors picked up the largest fleet of ships he had ever seen in his 20 years of space travel. "Well, would you look at that?" Min-soo said to himself, adjusting his ship's course to get a better view. "Those are some beautiful ships. Never seen designs like that before." He activated his communication system and hailed the impressive fleet with genuine enthusiasm. "Hello there. Those are absolutely gorgeous vessels you've got there. You folks lost? I've been working this system for 2 decades, and I've got the freshest navigation charts you'll find anywhere. Happy to share them if you need help finding anything." On the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, Admiral Krivash received this transmission with growing confusion. The small human ship was approaching his battle fleet without any apparent fear or caution, as if the presence of 200 heavily armed warships was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Small vessel," Admiral Krivash transmitted, trying to regain control of the situation, "you will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. By the authority of the Galactic Council and the Hegemony Fleet Command, you are hereby ordered to submit to our custody." Captain Min-soo received this message and assumed it was some kind of cultural greeting he wasn't familiar with. Different species had different ways of saying hello, after all, and he had learned to be flexible in his dealings with alien cultures. "Right back at you, friend," he responded enthusiastically. "Welcome to the Sol system. Say, since you're here, are you folks interested in some premium asteroid platinum? I just finished refining a batch yesterday and it's still got that fresh space smell. Grade A quality, guaranteed to meet any industrial specifications you might have." Admiral Krivash found himself completely at a loss. The human was treating his declaration of military authority as if it were a casual business proposition. "This is Admiral Krivash of the Hegemony 7th Fleet," he tried again, speaking slowly and clearly. "You will surrender your vessel and submit to interrogation." "Admiral Krivash," Min-soo repeated cheerfully. "Great to meet you, Admiral. I'm Captain Han Min-soo of the Golden Tiger. You know, if you're new to this system, you should really be careful about the asteroid field around here. It can be tricky to navigate if you don't know the gravitational patterns." What happened next became the stuff of legend among human spacers for generations to come. Captain Min-soo, genuinely concerned for the safety of the impressive alien fleet, began providing Admiral Krivash with a detailed tour of the local asteroid field. "Now, you see that cluster over there?" Min-soo explained, guiding his small ship through the rocky maze with practiced ease. "That's what we call the graveyard. Looks safe enough, but there's a micropulsar hidden behind those big rocks that creates all sorts of gravitational anomalies. Lost 3 ships in there before we figured out the pattern." Admiral Krivash found his massive fleet struggling to keep up with the nimble human freighter as it darted between asteroids that seemed to appear out of nowhere. His ships, designed for open space combat, were having serious difficulty navigating the cluttered environment. "And over here," Min-soo continued, completely oblivious to the chaos he was causing, "this is the sweet spot. Best platinum deposits in the system. The trick is to approach from the sunward side to avoid the radiation buildup from that solar flare activity we get every few months." 3 of Admiral Krivash's cruisers had already suffered minor collisions with asteroids, and his formation was in complete disarray. His navigation officers were frantically trying to plot safe courses through the field while simultaneously trying to keep track of the helpful human who seemed to know every rock and gravitational eddy in the system. "Captain," Min-soo added helpfully, "you might want to tell your ships to watch out for that spinning rock cluster up ahead. It's got some tricky mass distribution that can throw off your artificial gravity if you get too close." As if on cue, the Hegemony destroyer Implacable Fury experienced exactly that problem, sending half its crew floating toward the ceiling as its gravity generators struggled to compensate for the unexpected gravitational interference. Admiral Krivash realized with growing horror that his magnificent battle fleet, the pride of the Hegemony military, was being completely outmaneuvered by a single human in a ship that looked like it was held together with spare parts and good intentions. The news traveled through human space faster than any military fleet could move. Within hours of Captain Han Min-soo's encounter with Admiral Krivash's fleet, every communication network from Earth to the outer colonies was buzzing with excitement about the massive alien ships that had arrived in the Sol system. On Mars, the Daily Herald's editor Kim Ji-won was having the best day of her career. "First contact finally happens, tourism stocks surge," her headline declared in bold letters across the front page. The article went on to explain how humanity had finally made contact with what appeared to be a major galactic civilization, and how this could revolutionize interstellar tourism and trade. "This could be the biggest business opportunity in human history," she wrote enthusiastically. "Imagine the cultural exchange possibilities, the trade agreements, the tourism potential. Our economy could expand beyond anything we've ever dreamed of." The stock market responded exactly as she predicted. Shares in interstellar shipping companies doubled within hours. Hotels and resorts began planning expansion projects to accommodate alien visitors. Translation software companies saw their values skyrocket as investors realized the massive demand for communication tools. Merchant Captain Song Nara was loading cargo at the Jupiter orbital station when she heard the news. She had spent 15 years hauling supplies between human colonies, and she recognized a business opportunity when she saw one. If these aliens were really as friendly as Captain Minsa's report suggested, they might be interested in human products. She quickly changed her cargo manifest, filling her holds with coffee beans from Earth's finest plantations, kimchi from the famous fermentation labs on New Sol Colony, chocolate from the Mars agricultural domes, and a selection of welcome gifts including music recordings, art prints, and samples of human literature translated into 17 different languages. "If we're making first contact," she told her crew as they loaded the last containers, "we might as well make a good impression." The journey to the Sol system took 2 days, and Song Nara spent the entire time imagining the historic moment when she would become one of the first humans to engage in proper diplomatic trade with an alien civilization. She pictured herself shaking hands with exotic alien ambassadors and signing trade agreements that would be remembered for centuries. What she found when she arrived was nothing like what she had expected. Admiral Krivash's magnificent 7th Fleet was scattered across the asteroid field in what could only be described as complete chaos. Half of his ships were stuck between asteroids, their hulls scraped and dented from collisions with rocks they had somehow failed to see coming. The other half were being assisted by a small army of human mining and salvage ships whose crews had responded to what they assumed were distress calls. The scene was surreal. Tiny human ships were carefully guiding massive alien warships through safe passages in the asteroid field, their crews chattering cheerfully over open communication channels about the best routes to take and which rocks to avoid. It looked less like a military invasion and more like a complicated rescue operation. Most surprising of all, Admiral Krivash's flagship, the mighty Eternal Dominance, was currently docked at Luna Station. Song Nara could see alien crew members walking through the station's corridors, many of them carrying cups of what appeared to be bubble tea and looking thoroughly confused by their surroundings. She docked her own ship and made her way through the station to find Admiral Krivash himself standing in the main concourse, all 8 feet of his armored form looking completely bewildered as a human teenager tried to explain how to use a vending machine. "You just put your credit chip here," the teenager was saying patiently, "and then select what you want from the screen. The green tea bubble tea is really popular with first-time visitors." Song Nara approached with her cargo manifest in hand. "Excuse me," she said politely to the towering alien admiral, "I'm Captain Song Nara and I've brought some welcome gifts from the human colonies. Would you be interested in some cultural exchange items?" Admiral Krivash stared down at her with 4 eyes that seemed to reflect deep confusion and something that might have been despair. I came here to conquer your species," he said slowly. "Why are you offering me gifts?" "Well," Song Nara said with a bright smile, "that's what neighbors do, isn't it? Welcome each other and share what they have. I've got some amazing coffee from Earth and kimchi that'll change your life. Have you ever tried fermented vegetables? They're incredible for your digestive system." While Admiral Krivash was struggling with the concept of conquest-turned hospitality in the Sol system, other Galactic Council fleets were having equally confusing experiences throughout human space. The Zephyrian Armada, consisting of 50 gleaming ships designed to strike terror into the hearts of their enemies, arrived at Alpha Centauri during the worst possible time for an invasion. The 3 human colonies in the system were in the middle of their annual music festival, a celebration that had grown from a simple local event into a system-wide party that attracted visitors from across human space. Admiral ZYXI had planned to demonstrate Zephyrian superiority by destroying the main colony's power grid and demanding immediate surrender. Instead, his ships were greeted by a massive holographic banner that read, "Welcome to Harmony Week. All species welcome," and received immediate invitations to participate in the festivities. The confusion reached its peak when a delegation of human festival organizers arrived at his flagship in a decorated shuttle, bringing samples of music from 17 different human cultures and asking if the Zephyrians would be interested in sharing their own musical traditions. "We've never had crystalline beings at the festival before," the lead organizer explained enthusiastically. I bet your people make amazing sounds when you vibrate your body structure. Would you consider giving a performance? Admiral ZYXHI found himself signing what he thought was a surrender document but turned out to be a participation agreement for the festival's cultural exchange program. Meanwhile, the Nexary War fleet had discovered that their target world, Kepler 438b, had been transformed by humans into something completely unexpected. Instead of the military outpost they had been briefed to expect, they found a carefully maintained wildlife sanctuary where humans were protecting and studying the planet's indigenous life forms. The colony administrator, Dr. Lee Soo-jin, greeted the Nexary fleet with genuine excitement. "Oh, wonderful. Are you here for the ecological survey program? We've been hoping to get more perspectives on our conservation efforts. The local ecosystem is absolutely fascinating, and we'd love to show you around." The Nexary commander found himself being offered guided tours of endangered species habitats instead of the opportunity to demand surrender, and somehow ended up signing environmental protection agreements rather than conquest treaties. The crystalline halls of Nexus Prime had never seen anything quite like this emergency session of the Galactic Council. As delegates from 847 species filed into the ancient amphitheater, the differences from their last gathering 6 months ago were impossible to ignore. Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony walked to his speaking podium wearing his traditional ornate ceremonial robes, but now they were decorated with dozens of colorful woven bracelets that sparkled in the hall's lighting. Around his 4 massive arms were friendship bands made from earth cotton in bright blues, reds, and yellows, each one carefully crafted by human children from the new Terra colony. Throughout the assembly, similar changes were visible everywhere. The Zephyrian delegation had somehow acquired human-made scarves that complemented their crystalline forms beautifully. Several Aquarian representatives carried what appeared to be thermal containers with steaming beverages inside. Even the normally austere energy beings seemed to flicker with colors that matched the human-designed light displays they had apparently become fond of. The Stonewalker delegation had perhaps undergone the most dramatic transformation. These ancient beings, who traditionally wore nothing but their natural rocky exterior, were now sporting human-designed tool belts filled with gardening equipment and what appeared to be recipe cards laminated for durability. As the session began, the usual subsonic rumbles and electromagnetic pulses of formal galactic discourse were interrupted by the quiet sounds of alien delegates sharing snacks from small containers and comparing what looked like vacation planning materials. Ambassador Veltar cleared his throat, a sound that resonated through his translator as a deep, somewhat embarrassed cough. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice lacking the righteous fury that had characterized their previous meeting, "we have gathered once again to discuss the OIS situation, with humanity." A collective murmur went through the assembly, though it sounded more like nervous laughter than the angry protests of 6 months ago. "The war," Veltar continued, pausing as if the words themselves were difficult to speak, "has been unprecedented in the history of galactic civilization." He activated the holographic display above the assembly, and the statistics that appeared caused a stunned silence to fall over the gathered representatives. "The final military assessment is as follows," Veltar read from his notes, his voice growing quieter with each item. "Human casualties, 0. Human ships destroyed, 0. Human colonies surrendered, 0. Human military resistance encountered, 0. The silence stretched on as delegates absorbed these numbers. In galactic history, no species had ever survived a coordinated council military action without losing something. However, Veltar continued, his voice taking on a different tone entirely, the war has produced other results. New numbers appeared on the display, and this time several delegates gasped audibly. New trade agreements established, 73. Cultural exchange programs initiated, 89. Diplomatic relations formed with previously unknown species, 26. Council member species that have established permanent human settlements, 41. The Serpentine delegate hissed something that the translator rendered as, "How is this possible?" Peace treaties mediated by human diplomats between warring council species, 17. Veltar continued reading. New tourism routes established through human space, 112. Council fleets that have requested extended shore leave at human recreational facilities, all of them. At this point, Admiral Krivash of the Hegemony stood up from his seat in the military observer section. He was wearing what appeared to be a t-shirt that read, "I survived the Sol System asteroid field and all I got was this lousy t-shirt and some really great friends. If I may address the council," he said, his voice carrying none of its former military authority, "I believe I can explain what happened to our invasion fleets. Veltar nodded for him to continue. The humans, Admiral Krivash began slowly, do not appear to understand the concept of war as we know it. When we arrived with weapons charged and surrender demands ready, they assumed we were lost tourists and offered us navigation assistance. He paused, seeming to struggle with the memory. When we tried to demand their surrender, they offered us snacks and asked if we needed help with repairs. When we attempted to demonstrate our superior firepower, they complimented our ship designs and asked if we would be interested in participating in their cultural festivals. The Mechanical Construct Coalition emitted a series of beeps that translated as confused agreement. Every single attempt at conquest, Admiral Krivash continued, was interpreted by the humans as an opportunity for friendship and cultural exchange. They have somehow managed to turn the largest military alliance in galactic history into the largest diplomatic mission in galactic history. It was at this moment that the main doors to the council chamber opened with a cheerful chime. Ambassador Park Jisoo walked in, looking slightly out of breath and carrying several large bags that seemed to be filled with small packages. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry I'm late," she called out to the assembly, her voice echoing through the vast hall. Traffic was absolutely terrible coming through the Vega sector. There's some kind of construction project going on there, and you wouldn't believe the delays. She made her way to the center of the chamber, seemingly unaware that 847 different species were staring at her in complete silence. "But I brought snacks for everyone," she announced cheerfully, beginning to unpack her bags. "I've got Korean rice cakes, some lovely pastries from our new Busan colony, and some of that chocolate that everyone seems to love so much." She began moving through the assembly, handing out small wrapped packages to bewildered alien delegates who accepted them with the same confused politeness they had shown throughout the entire war. "You know," she continued conversationally as she distributed treats, "I was thinking on the way over here that it might be fun if humanity joined the Galactic Council officially. We've been having such wonderful interactions with everyone, and it seems like we could contribute a lot to galactic civilization." She paused in front of Ambassador Veltar and offered him a small package. "These are honey cakes," she explained helpfully. "They're traditional Korean sweets. I thought you might enjoy them." Ambassador Veltar accepted the package with two of his four hands, staring at it as if it might contain the secrets of the universe. "So," Ambassador Park continued brightly, "what do you think? Would you like us to join your council? We promise to be very good galactic citizens." The vote to end the war and accept humanity's application for council membership was unanimous. Later, in a small classroom on New Seoul Colony, 8-year-old Kang Sujin raised her hand during history class. "Teacher," she asked innocently, "why do all the history books talk about the Great Galactic War when all our alien neighbors are so nice and friendly?" Her teacher, former Admiral Zhuxi, who now ran the colony's cultural center and taught part-time at the local school, smiled and reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small wrapped package containing homemade chocolate chip cookies. "Sometimes, Sujin," he said gently, offering her the treat, "the best way to win a war is to make everyone forget they wanted to fight in the first place."